Hi, my name is Sarah McPherson. I'm the Director of Philanthropy and Communications with the Oakville Community Foundation, and I'm pleased to welcome you today to our presentation and our discussion with Mark Halpern, CEO of wealthinsurance.com Inc., and a friend of the community, our community foundation, and donors alike. I'll also be joined at a later point with our board chair, Bindu Cujo, who is the Senior Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary at Canadian Western Bank, as well as a longtime Oakville resident. She'll be chatting with Mark after the presentation, and we'll also be able to share any questions you, our guests, may have for Mark specifically. So, as this title suggests, the discussion today is focused on how to help maximize giving, minimize taxes. But I also think it's a poignant statement when we look at this slide that says, I love my nephew, and I also love my community. It's truly what, in fact, is why we're here today. This is part of a national campaign to raise awareness with people about how to use their will to be more able to support your family and your community. So I wanted to share this because I think it's great to say that you can have both. You can support and love your neighbor and your nephew, and also our community. So before I get into any further details, I first want to acknowledge that Oakville lies on the traditional territories of the Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe. We recognize that these lands include treaties 14 and 22 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who now call our town home. We are so grateful for the guidance of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the many Indigenous knowledge keepers and community leaders who have shared their knowledge on this reconciliation journey. So it's entirely possible you've all seen this page before. I think many of my colleagues in the field who may be joining us today, in fact, know this piece very well. This is an extract from the Rideau Hall Foundation and Imagine Canada's report that looks back from 1985 to 2014 and the giving trends. But this is also pre-COVID. So for example, the point about 170,000 charities and nonprofits contributing 8.1% to the GDP. Today, that's actually closer to 8.4. What's missing here on this slide is the sheer number of people employed in the sector, nearly 2 million. What is constant here is the fact that becoming more and more engaged in the philanthropy and the world of decision-making around charitable support are the voices of our youth and new Canadians and immigrants. Our foundation is very focused on ensuring that we are listening to and hearing the youth of our community, as well as those who are new to Canada, and ensuring that we can provide an avenue for their philanthropic interests. So one thing that's very, very mindful, that is everybody has different decisions, everybody has different passions and different stories. So to quote Simon Sinek, what's your why? I think this chart shows very clearly that most Canadians are motivated to donate by a mixture of personal and ideological factors. I personally give because of things that matter to me that I've been affiliated to, and that's very common. Whereas ideological things could be compassions towards those things that people need and have a desire to give back to their community. So you're probably wondering, why did I start with these two slides? Well, today's discussion with Mark and with those advisors and donors is we all have a collective responsibility and role to do what we can to support our charitable sector. But more importantly is that we are all different. We're all unique. And frankly, we all have different motivations. So I also want to lay a little bit of a landscape of what community foundations are, and also a little bit of the insights of our community foundation. Because if you've seen one community foundation, you've seen one community foundation. We are all different. So we are part of a national network. There's 191 community foundations across Canada. And as you can see, ours has been established since 1994. We're nearing 30 years. Stay tuned for an anniversary party that celebrates our community coming soon. These details and figures are all from our 2020 year-end audited statements, but it shows you that we have 110 million in assets, that we have a very good gross annual return over the last 10 years. We're the 10th largest in Canada. One of the roles that we serve is in supporting our local community agencies. And in fact, we have 16 agencies who have funds with us. This is a trust. This is an important statement of trust to us as community leaders that those agencies have chosen to support and be part of our family of foundation funds. 350 or more agencies receive grants from us each year. And just this past spring, we exceeded 53 million in granting since inception. And we're also known for having established the Oakville Heritage Trails. So why are we here today? We are here because advisors and donors alike, we want to work with you. Most importantly, for donors and advisors, we have a role where we can put permanent resources in place to change the face of our community. We can increase funds that ultimately support the community. But we know from our donors and others alike that their focus is on higher level of interest in and discussions with charitable solutions. They're also very engaged in our community and want higher engagement of our community. They have an opportunity, as do advisors, have an opportunity to increase gifts to help support charities through us and through other means within the community. And we can increase the stability of the charitable community and charitable services when we partner together. So what do donors ask and advisors ask us? Well, how can we add value? Well, for advisors, we can add value because we will work with you to help clients, but we also provide that community knowledge. We know on the ground who's doing what and can help your clients give with more meaning where they want to. So why should a donor use us? Well, because we can offer flexibility of gift structures that can remain and focus on the donor's goals, but also give you transparency and support. How can the foundation be distinguished from other entities? We offer oversight, accountability, and we are focused on the donor's intentions. Plus, we have the ability to change and adapt to the environment to ensure there's always an ongoing gift impact. Most recently, we experienced obviously fund support for the resiliency during a peak time in our community when dollars were needed to be rallied quickly. Thanks to the support of our foundation fund holders, as well as others in the community, we were able to do that quickly and swiftly, and to the charities that needed the support right away. So why not make gifts directly to a charity? You can, anyone can. One of the things though, working within the community foundation is we can provide the anonymity. We can help give you the assurances that your dollars are getting to the charity without the charity necessarily needing to know who the fund holders are that are supporting them. So let's talk a little nuts and bolts about the Oakville Community Foundation. So we have a number of different types of funds. The most common fund is our community fund, which is an unrestricted fund. It starts at $2,500, but you always have the ability to grow it to a donor advised fund, which is a $20,000 fund value. We have a designated fund, which means that you can directly name annually charities you wish to support from your fund. We have the donor advised fund, which acts like that private foundation. You need a minimum of 20,000, but once established and reached, you can do the granting directly from your fund. We have a discretionary endowed fund, which ensures that you have the ability to test this out, try it. Is this what you want? If it's something that you choose and in the long run you want to move somewhere else, you can. We can move this to another registered charity. We have a flow through and a spend down fund. Flow through allows you to do immediate granting, and a spend down fund allows you to spend it down. Where the additional benefit of the foundation's offerings is our program related investing. This is where we take strategic focus. We look at the ability to provide more than just a financial return. So we focus on supporting a solution to a social, cultural, or environmental issue. And anyone can participate when you have a fund with the foundation. So we also make giving easy. You can start a fund with $0. You can grow it to $2,500 in 5 years, and that gets you a community fund. And then you can continue to grow it. We have a bequest fund, which allows you to essentially leave a gift from your will to an established fund with us. And there's no commitment financially required at the start. We have gifts of privately held corporate shares that you can now contribute to the foundation. This is very, very new, and we have a gift acceptance policy that will reflect that in the very near future. And you can also give gifts of stocks and securities. You can also give gifts of insurance, which Mark will tell you a little bit more about. And of course, your registered investments and RSPs. We offer very much a digital platform. So now everything can be done 24/7 for your access and your ease of activities. We have a donor portal. It's open anytime you want it. You can see a list of donors. You can see your fund statement. You can see your gift agreements. You can see granting opportunities that are sometimes exclusive to our fund holders. We can provide multiple user access. Online donations can be done with immediate tax receipts, and there are no transaction fees for online donations below $10,000. Excuse me. So core to everything that we do in our community investment and community engagement is through research and local knowledge. Research informs us in every aspect of what we do, and it serves a great role and value to our fund holders as well. One of those is that this helps us develop our strategic initiatives. So one of our strategic initiatives is a focus on youth. It's called the Youth Collective Program. And this program is a partnership with the Halpern Children's Aid Society, also with a team of youth and 25 youth service agencies that represent different social services. The focus of the collective is to address the outcomes for young people who are leaving care or aging out of the child protection system, which are not particularly positive. Youth Successes, which is an element of our Youth Collective program, focuses on transition of youth into successful adults. One of our research reports in 2008 was called the Vital Youth Report. And in that, we've been tracking the SDG indicator that is no child left behind or not in education and employment. So youth aged 15 to 29, in fact, which we call the NEAT factor, tracks the successful transition of youth to adulthood. In the report we did, it demonstrated the disparity between youth transitioning out of the care system at 27%, not in education, employment, or training, while the average youth was 3 to 6% for ages 15 to 24. So while this average might seem low, it does equal to 1,240 youth in Oakville who are not on a successful trajectory. We now know too that during COVID, NEAT has increased. In particular, almost 1 in 5 youth, 17%, those aged 25 to 29 in Ontario, were NEAT in 2020. The Foundation's strategic SDG-aligned priority to increase opportunities, education, employment, and the social economy includes a number of initiatives, such as our Youth Transitioning Out of Care initiative, the Youth Collective. I also want to draw attention to the Homeward Bound Halton program that we've been supporting. In fact, we were the seed funder 7 years ago and continue to support it. This is really a wraparound program that supports single mothers who are coming out of or needing to come off the social assistance program. And how to do that is to help them with their educational needs and support every facet of their life with their children and their daycare and their aftercare and all of the educational support, as well as housing. So the Homeward Bound Halton program has been extremely successful. And in fact, the foundation, as a seed funder, has been able to support many, many women who have grown out of this program. We also have granting and program offerings beyond these initiatives. So those are the Community Education Awards Hub. This program, this hub, was created in 2020 in January. And alas, by 2020 March, we were in our pandemic. We didn't know then how important this hub would be for students in our community. What this acts as is a central point for students to apply for grants or scholarships, education, and bursaries, that are provided by our community partners. Our community partners are service clubs such as the Rotary, Maycourt, as well as the foundation's own education awards. Students in the first year, accessed over 300,000 in scholarships, bursaries, and awards. And in 2021, we had over 700 youth use and access this portal. We also have the community classroom program, which was established in, I believe it was 2019. And it essentially helps support the publicly funded schools in Oakville. And specifically for the junior kindergarten through grade 8. With 1 in 8 children in Oakville that live in poverty, with 14% of Oakville families who are living in subsidized family units, we know that extracurricular activities may not be affordable for their kids. So this allows us, we are providing educational programs for students in these publicly funded schools that enable them a better sense of belonging. It helps us connect the dots between what is in your community to our children and helps them build a greater sense of belonging in our Oakville community. And lastly, I want to draw some attention to our crowdfunding program. This is called Give Oakville. We're now in our 4th year. The program offers charities an opportunity to apply for funds of $25,000 maximum. It allows the public at large to see a breadth and depth of charities who are in our backyard and where we can help to raise funds for them specifically. The foundation provides the avenue. It provides 100% of all the donations go to the charities that have been chosen. We cover all the administration costs, and donors receive a tax receipt for their support. Lastly, and I'm going to lead with this, which is how we also work to help enable collective giving. So in 2018, a group of women formed together the first ever giving collective for Oakville and under the umbrella of the foundation. In our first year, we had 22 members. We now have 34. Each contributes annually, and as part of that contribution, we put a portion into endowed and a portion into flow through, which allows immediate granting. To date, we've supported $25,000 to our first charitable organization, and we're excited to say we will have a new charity organization to support going forward to complement their focus. So in addition to which, this past year, we have welcomed the Oakville Dads Group, who are a previously established group. They have over 2,000 members through their Facebook group. They are looking for future ways to grow and build sustainability for funding and granting. So we've created 2 funds for them. One is for their regular annual granting through their flow-through fund, and the other is with an endowed fund that will in future support their scholarship program that they will be running in the future years. So at that, I'd like to leave and say, I want to welcome an expert. I want to welcome a friend to the Community Foundation. Our speaker today is Mark Halpern. So Mark and I have been discussing this presentation for a few years now. And in fact, he first connected with the Community Foundation well over 10 years ago because I've been with the foundation for 11 now. So it's been such a great joy to follow Mark, follow his articles, watch his videos. And I'm really appreciative of the dedication that he has made to the charitable sector and helping his clients, his donors, do more in a strategic way and honestly give with more passion, give with more purpose, and minimize those taxes. So with that, I want to welcome Mark.
Okay, fantastic. So just as a quick introduction, Sarah mentioned about willpower, and I just want to mention about willpower just so people understand what's about to happen here in Canada and what we're going to be exposed to. Willpower actually started out of the UK over 10 years ago, where only 5% of all people who had wills had actually left a gift in their will, only 5%. So they went on a marketing campaign for over 10 years with other nonprofits, and they bought retail advertising, TV, radio, online, offline, bus shelter with a very simple, elegant message: leave a gift in your will. That was it. After 10 years, that number went from 5% to 9%. And that delta of that 4% represents $50 billion of charity that's going to be coming to the UK. So we've now launched it nationally here in Canada through the CAGP, and the objective is to raise $40 billion. So you can hear a lot of a lot of advertising. It's a pull campaign. Contact your advisor, contact your favorite charity, or contact affiliated advisors that are involved. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's a very important thing that we're talking about today. So yeah, it's very exciting to share with you what I'm doing, certainly around other organizations and helping. Really, our goal is, we have a very ambitious goal of wanting to create $100 million of new charity every year. We ended up at the end of 2000 with just over $61 million. But that's working with clients, working with nonprofits like the Oakville Community Foundation, and also working with allied professionals, because every one of our clients, they need a team, they need experts to help. So we really want to collaborate. And I think that's a very important message. So I'm just going to I'm going to share the screen right now and put up my presentation and hopefully walk you through this and provide you with some wisdom and knowledge to help your clients and your families. And we'll have some time for questions as well at the very end. Of course, disclaimer, please speak to your professional advisors. We want to make sure that everything is bespoke for your particular situation. But a lot's happened in the last 20 years. In 2001, we had Steve Jobs, Bob Hope, and Johnny Cash. Fast forward 20 years, no Jobs, no Hope, and no cash. It's not all doom and gloom. Certainly we have a new old government that just got installed in Ottawa, and apparently they want to make our lives easier. So they're planning on introducing a new simplified tax return with only one question: how much money did you make? Send it to us. Now, we say this jokingly, but the reality is there's some big changes about to happen, and you need to know about these for your own families, for your clients, and just for the community at large. Taxes are going up. That's not a question of if, it's a question of when. A lot of dollars have been printed. You're going to see a potential inheritance tax, a wealth tax, a principal residence tax, an income tax increase. We really need to figure out ways to control some of that tax spend with planning on our own. The second thing is that most Canadians have done investing, but they haven't done planning. Planning is very different. It goes from not just appreciating your assets, but it's the defense. It's like preserving what you have and maximizing your income and looking at tax efficiency. It's a different approach, and people don't realize how much they actually have at the end of the day versus what they have on paper. It's a very important thing that people have to be aware of. And we're also at an information age, or I call it a misinformation age. People are going online to get information, but you really need professionals, and you need a team around you to sort of make sure that things are aligned going forward. We've heard of Freedom 55, right, from London Life, their famous ad. Freedom 55 today is when your youngest child is 55. Now, that's kind of funny. I've got 5 children. I know what they're like being on my payroll. But, getting out of school today and trying to find a job and trying to buy real estate in the GTA or paying back student loans, like, our kids are going to be on the dole for a little longer than usual for us. The good news is that people are seeking meaning. Even though with the COVID, people are much more aware of their mortality and their lack of incompletions. One of those is really their legacy. They would like to be able to do something that makes a difference. And again, if we can help them by converting taxes into charity, that would be a great thing. Now, my real start was not 30 years ago. As Sarah said, my real start was actually on March the 8th, 1974. And that's when my father, who's pictured here of blessed memory, died of a heart attack at the age of 50. I was 11. I was the youngest of 4 boys. And my mother, who was 48 at the time, had to go back to work to support our family. Unfortunately, my father was a very busy engineer, and there was no will, very little savings, and there was no life insurance. So it was difficult for all of us. We all achieved great success in terms of being professionals. But fast forward, my practice is working with some of the wealthiest business owners and entrepreneurs and retirees and affluent families. And you'd think they'd have everything all organized. But I would suggest that 80% of the time it's not true. They're so busy working and taking care of everybody else that when it comes to themselves, they're the financial architecture they started with and the furniture they had then just doesn't match up with their current financial architecture and furniture. So it really does require looking at things from 30,000 feet. We specialize in looking in 3 areas: estate planning, tax minimization, and philanthropy. And really, where does that come from? It comes from taking a big picture look at your own estate planning with your professional advisors. Really making sure that you have a will, having an estate directory, insurance, investment planning, business succession. And as you can see at the bottom, we always bring up charitable plan giving. And the introduction that we give to clients is, if you had a choice of where your taxes went to, and you could choose between giving them to the tax department or to charities that you care about, which would you choose? And most people would say they would take family and charity. And how do you get to that whole place around using philanthropy for tax deduction or reduction, or just for creating legacies? And that's really most people, when they get to be 60 years of age, 50 plus, depending on how successful you've been, most people have accumulated a lot of assets. But at some point they start accessing those assets for lifestyle. But if you're really a good investor, you'll actually see the increase of your assets in your estate going forward. As a matter of fact, most of my clients, that unless they were to invest in a penny stock or start spending frivolously, chances are they're going to have more money when they die than what they have today, which means that they're sitting as the trustee or the custodian for the next generation. But what they're not aware of is that they're partnering with the tax department on that money. So we like to go through an exercise, as you should as well, to see, what are the tax liabilities today? Do I have enough money for retirement? What are going to be the tax consequences upon death? And is there any never spend money that we could be using to either preserve our estate for our family or use for charity? And that's because there are a lot of taxes out there. Here's just an example of some of the things that people are not aware of. It's incredible in Canada how many people I've spoken to who don't even realize that their RSPs or the RIFs are going to be taxable. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And here's just some of the numbers on taxes payable in Ontario. If you have RSPs or RIFs or pensions, let's put away the pensions for a sec, but just look at your registered money. And if you have a spouse, everything rolls over to your spouse tax-free. But upon the second death of a husband and wife, those assets over 220,000 are taxed at 54%, which means if you have $1 million of registered assets, they're only really worth only 460 to your family. Capital gains, if you have appreciated security shares or appreciated investment real estate, not your principal residence or business. So any of the gains that are over and above the cost base are going to be taxed at 27%. Or if you have money in a corporation, a holding company, minimally, it's going to be taxed at 50%. It could be as much as 70% without proper planning. And of course, you have passive income on money in corporations. And then you have probate tax of 1.5% in Ontario. Notice it's called an estate administrative tax. Notice the acronym EAT. So that also requires planning. So it's not unusual for me to meet somebody who has $10 million of net worth, but is only worth 6.5 million once we sort of do the planning. And therefore, now we can take care of things while the sun is shining for their family or for charity. And as mentioned before, all of us have 3 possible beneficiaries to our estate. You have family, you have the tax department, and charity, and each of us can only pick 2. Which 2 would you pick? Most people would say family and charity. And this is one of the first places, if you're an advisor listening, that's really, I find that the conversation is kind of like a bit of a sandwich. There's the emotional talk, just to get people into the chapter around giving and legacy. Then there's the technical part, we'll call that the meat of the sandwich. And then we end it off again with an emotional part to get people fully engaged in the process. What we create in our professional practice are what we call accidental philanthropists. And we create accidental philanthropy. And what that is that there are two kinds of people out there in Canada. There's first of all, there's 38 million Canadians. And of those 38 million Canadians, only 5 million have given money to charity. Okay, only 5 million. That's actually a factual number. So there are people who have the education, perhaps from being brought up in a charitable home where they like to give, and then there are people who don't give for whatever reason. They didn't get that education. But once those people realize that they have a choice where their taxes go, that they can give them to charity as opposed to the tax department, suddenly those people become accidental philanthropists. And the people who are giving already with some of the concepts we're going to talk about now can give more at the same cost, or give the same amount but at less cost. So it does provide people with lots of opportunities. So that's really what we want to do. We want to find the money. And here's just a list of accidental philanthropists. I'm just going to go through these quickly because you should be on the lookout either for yourself or through your client base or through your neighbors. Widows, divorcees, and singles are one instant away from a very large tax disposition. They should be told about this. Or if somebody is selling or has sold a business or some investment real estate or appreciated securities, they're going to have their biggest tax that year, which means they can also give the most to charity that year to offset that tax, or what I call convert the tax into charity. Anybody that has done or will be doing an estate freeze has an opportunity to do a private share donation strategy to reduce the costs of tax and create charity instead. Anyone that's going to pay taxes next April, and this is a perfect prime time right now. We're at the beginning of October. If you have any appreciated non-registered securities that has gains in those, hey, instead of giving those gains of 27% to the government, you can give that stock to your donor advised fund at the Oakville Community Foundation, pay no capital gains taxes, and save up to 75% of your taxes due next April. Or if you have a foundation or a donor advised fund, there are ways for you to be maximizing what you're doing currently in there. If you have an old life insurance policy you no longer need, that won't move the dial on your family's estate planning or inheritance, consider donating that to charity and getting a nice charitable receipt. Or anybody who has an estate tax bill on death can instead use a gift as opposed to giving that estate tax to the government. Or if you've just left a gift or bequest in your will. These are all people who have the ability to become what we call accidental philanthropists. And very high level, simple math, for every $2 that you donate to charity, you save $1 of tax. Now, that's just, call that sort of the big picture. $2 goes to the charity, you save $1 of tax. And whatever receipts you receive in any given year, those receipts can be used to offset up to 75% of your annual income tax payable. Any additional receipts over and above that can be carried forward for up to 5 years. So it's a very, very efficient way of creating charity and saving taxes. At death, something that a lot of people don't know is receipts can be used to offset 100% of estate taxes, and that receipt can even go back the prior year to offset taxes then as well. So really great ways to create charity and save taxes and create legacies for your family. And not all donations are the same. This applies, again, this is just an example of somebody who wants to give $1 million, okay? Again, this is all scalable. 10% is 100,000, 5% is 50,000, you get the idea. But this person wanted to give $1 million away of either cash, public shares, appreciated shares, or using flow-through shares, which we can talk about, or using a life insurance policy. And as you can see, the cost here, for each dollar, it's about 50 cents for each dollar if you give cash, checks, or credit cards, which is the most inefficient way of giving to charity. If you had appreciated securities, assuming a zero cost base, it would cost about 23 cents a dollar to give to charity. Flow-through shares are available across the country, depending on your jurisdiction, and they could cost you anywhere between 5 and 15 cents per dollar that you give to charity. So if you're already giving money to charity, look at a flow-through share, because it's a way of you actually giving the same amount for less cost Or better yet, now that it's costing you less money, you can give more than you were planning on giving for the same cost. Or life insurance. In this case, $1 million joint last to die insurance policy on a couple, age 55 works out to about 12 cents per dollar. So not all gifts are the same. So it's very important to look at these and see how they fit in to your personal planning. And we're just going to talk about some gifting options here. Very basic stuff, either a bequest, a gift in your will, using RSPs or RIFs, or giving securities, or gifting life insurance. And we'll start off with gifts in your will. It can be as simple as changing your will and consider including a gift to the Oakville Community Foundation, to your donor advised fund, for a specific amount or a percentage of your estate. Even 1% of your estate is a huge number. And although it sounds like 1%, it's not a lot, but it's a big number. It can make a big difference. And remember, $2 will save $1 of tax. If you don't want to change your will, why not just get in touch with your financial institution, and you can get what's known as a multiple beneficiary designation form and contribute a certain amount or percentage of your registered money to charity upon your death as a beneficiary. Again, that money would have been taxed at 54%. And that's really a big area in Canada. The RSPs and RIFs, to me, are the biggest tax time bomb. And unfortunately, the government is biased against widows, divorcees, and singles, because when you have a spouse, all of your money rolls over to your surviving spouse tax-free. It's not until the second to die of a husband and wife that taxes are due. But if you're single, you're just one instant away from a huge tax disposition. So $1 million of RSP money would only be $460,000 to heirs because of the tax of 54%. So we've identified several different ways to make sure that your family gets the full $1 million and money goes to charity. Or if this amount of money, the RSP or RIF, is really inconsequential to your family, why not consider donating the full amount to charity and nothing goes to tax? In which case, now your family has a legacy of that amount of registered money to be able to be distributed in perpetuity through their donor advised fund at the Oakville Community Foundation. Other ways of giving, I call this gifting personal securities. And we call this the double play. I had a lawyer who was giving $50,000 of cash annually to charity. That means he'd have to make $100,000, pay tax to have 50 to donate, which would save him $25,000 of tax. But he had a large appreciated non-registered securities portfolio. And instead we said, let's take $50,000 in shares that cost him only $10,000. So there's a gain of $40,000, meaning if he sold those shares on the market, that $50,000, there would be a tax of $10,800, which means those shares are not really worth $50,000 to him. Those shares are only worth, under $40,000 in reality. So what he could do though is he could go ahead and donate the shares for the full market value, pay no capital gains taxes, and get a full receipt for $50,000. And this is really an amazing end of year strategy as we're in right now. If you're looking into April and you've got taxes that are due and you've got some appreciated securities, donate them to your Oakville Community Foundation Donor Advised Fund today. Interesting statistic, of the 5 million Canadians who give to charity, of the 5 million, only 5,000 have ever given appreciated securities. That means people don't know about this still. And it's a shame, because we all have appreciated mutual funds and stock and ETFs and segregated funds that we're not even aware of the fact how much doesn't belong to us. Consider giving it to charity. It can just be parked in your donor advised fund and distributed down the road. Corporately, you can do the same thing. Let's say you have appreciated securities inside your holding company. Instead, look, you can give 50,000 in shares with a cost base of 10,000. In this case, it's a deduction for the company, and the growth, that 10,000 to 50,000, which is 40,000, which is the capital gain, that can actually come out of the company now, tax-free, through the capital dividend account. So it's almost like one of those, income splitting with spouses. You can now make a donation. It reduces the value of your company for tax purposes. You pay no capital gains taxes, and you get money out of the company, which is great. Now, any of you who know somebody who's selling a business, or taking out a very large, disposition on something, that year is the year that they're going to have their biggest tax, Why not give a lot more to charity, in which case that'll offset the taxes? But the beautiful part is then you can use something like life insurance to put the donation amount back into the hands of your children and your grandchildren. So nobody's complaining that they've been shut out. It's just a timing issue. They'll get all the money back, and you can do that for pennies on the dollar. But now you've established a beautiful charitable donation, you've reduced taxes, and you've set up a system in place to be able to get that money back to your family down the road. Something to consider and be on the lookout for people who have sold a business. We don't have a lot of, call them, tax shelters left in Canada. We only have 4 left, other than your principal residence, which they're looking at changing, where there could potentially be taxes on principal residences going forward. TFSAs are also not taxable, but just a small amount that you can put away every year of $6,000. Lottery winnings in Canada are still tax-free. In the States, they're taxable, so make sure you buy your lottery tickets here in Canada. And the last one is tax-exempt life insurance, is also a tax-free asset to have. That means anything else that you own, there's somebody at the CRA that you love very, very much that has their hand out that wants to share in your success up to about 27% of whatever your investments have appreciated by, other than these 4 things. So I think it would be very important to see how could you possibly integrate these into your planning to help you and your family around charitable giving and tax savings. So let's talk about gifting of life insurance. So one way is donate an existing insurance policy. Many of us have old policies that we've collected, when kids were young, you had a mortgage, kids' education, food on the table. It might be a policy worth 100,000, 250, 500. You can actually take that policy and get an actuary to value that as a fair market value, and now donate that policy to charity or to your donor advised fund. And you get a charitable receipt for the donation of your own policy to your charitable fund, which saved you a lot of taxes. Going forward, the premiums you now pay are considered charitable donations, and they could fund the policy going forward. Or in some cases, as Sarah will attest to, if the policy is very valuable policy, the charity actually going forward might actually pay for those premiums going forward. So as an example, I have worked with many universities and hospitals, but one university, an alumnus, had a $300,000 policy that he donated to the university. He got a $175,000 charitable receipt for that policy donation because his health had gone awry. He had Parkinson's. So that saved him a lot of taxes. And going forward, the university is paying the premiums going forward. So he did great. He got a big tax savings. He created a legacy. The charity went ahead and is funding it going forward, and he's recognized for doing something great. So don't let those policies just fall off the books. Another way is perhaps donating a new policy. Let's say you know that you're going to have $1 million tax on death, an estate tax of $1 million. Why not get a $2 million life insurance policy for pennies on the dollars and make the beneficiary of that a charity or your donor advised fund? On death, the $2 million, let's say, would go to your donor advised fund. Your estate would get a charitable receipt for $2 million. Now the $1 million of estate taxes is gone, and the $1 million of estate taxes now became $1 million of charity, or in this case, $2 million. So very, very scalable. And the last thing is, if you don't want to go through all of this, if you already have insurance, why not just change the beneficiary on your current insurance and put a certain percentage or dollar amount to your donor advised fund at the Oakville Community Foundation? 1% makes a big difference, 2%, 5%. And certainly it's not going to make a big change in the value to your estate, but it certainly would create some wonderful legacy for your family. So that's a couple of things of my insurance. And here's just another example of a 60-year-old couple. On the left side, as you can see, this is a situation where they don't want to donate any money to charity right away. They just want to do some investing with their current dollars, but use insurance to create more wealth for their family so they're in a position to give to charity down the road. So on the left side, here's a family that are putting away $100,000 a year for 15 years. So they're putting away $1.5 million over 15 years, assuming an interest rate at 4%. So if they did that, they put away $1.5 million, and 30 years later, the money hasn't even doubled because of taxes. There'd only be about 2.3 for their family. On the right side now, we're talking about using an insurance policy. This would be a joint last to die policy where they would deposit $100,000 a year of never spend money for 15 years. So that would be another $1.5 million. So it's the same from the left side to the right side. In this case, they have to buy a life insurance policy to be able to shelter that full $100,000. So it would be about a $2.5 million insurance policy. 15 years it's paid up. If they die after 20 years, their family gets $4.3 million. After 30 years, it's about $4.2 million. So what we've done is we've created almost $2 million more money than they would have had doing this on their own. That's money they could be giving to their kids for inheritances or giving to charity or doing both, children and charity. So it's just something that people should be taking a notice of and looking at it as part of their planning. And here's a big secret. And I'm glad Sarah brought it up, but it's still a big secret in Canada. Life insurance can be owned and paid for by a private foundation or a donor advised fund, which means that if you have money sitting in your donor advised fund, you can actually have an insurance policy owned by your donor advised fund. Your donor advised fund can be the beneficiary of that policy, and you can pay for it with money in your donor advised fund or with new money that you put into your donor advised fund to get receipts to save taxes and now use that to fund it. So we'll talk about that a little later on, but it's really an amazing way to what we call create transformative charity or maximize what you're currently doing for yourself and your family. Other giving strategies. So, Sarah mentioned about having a private foundation, I think, versus a donor advised fund. Private foundations, there's a cost to set up, there's annual reporting fees, et cetera. But I think one of the key things is that private foundations are really for people who want to put away at least, let's say, $1 million. That's the only way to really make it work. And private foundations are public, meaning I can go online to the CRA website and see everybody's private foundation, how much money's in it, who's on their board, everybody they've distributed money to, versus a donor advised fund, which is really an umbrella of a community foundation. Now you have your private foundation underneath. It's completely private. Nobody knows what's in there. The money gets distributed to charities, any registered charity in Canada, and you can either be sent where they acknowledge you, where it's coming from, or it doesn't. It's a lovely structure, and everyone in Canada should have a donor advised fund. There's no question. We talked about flow through shares as a way, if you're already giving, it's a way of giving at the least cost possible. Charitable gift annuities are another way of giving where, let's say, you want an investment return on your money. So you actually donate money to the charity and then they give you about a 5 or 6% return on your money throughout your lifetime. And also you get a charitable receipt for a portion of that gift as well. So it's something that's done in the States a lot, not as much in Canada, but if you're looking for income, people do millions of dollars of these in the United States. CPP philanthropy. Once you turn 65 in Canada, you're entitled to receive CPP. A husband and wife will generally receive about $26,000 a year between the two of them. And if they're wealthy, that $26,000 is taxed, it gets reinvested, and it's taxed again. But if you're philanthropic, there's some magic that you can do that we created back in 2017, and that's this. You could take that $26,000, you could buy about a $1.5 million joint last to die insurance policy with that $26,000. If it's owned by your donor advised fund or another charity, then the $26,000 is considered a charitable donation, which means you're paying no taxes on your CPP, but you've got a gift of $1 million for charity, all funded by your social benefits. Amazing. Or you could take that $26,000, pay the taxes on it, and have the $1.5 million policy, but have the beneficiary on death be a charity, in which case the charity gets the $1.5 million. You get it, your family gets a charitable receipt for $1.5 million, and it saves your estate $750,000 of taxes. Or the third one, which is the one I like the most, is take the $26,000, get the $1.5 million insurance policy, and make your children the beneficiary of the policy and donate your registered assets to charity. Remember, they were taxed at 54%. So suddenly now your kids got about 50% more and your registered assets became beautiful charitable donations. Just something to think about. ROP life insurance means a return of premium on life insurance. You could buy an insurance policy where the charity is the beneficiary, but on your death, all the premiums you paid go back to your family. So it's just a timing issue. You're putting money into this policy. You're going to create a beautiful legacy gift using insurance with charity. But upon death, the premiums you pay get paid back to your family. A neat thing. Gift maximizers, just most people think that life insurance is something that only will provide a benefit upon somebody's death. But in fact, we have many, many ways for people to actually be able to monetize their life insurance policies while they're alive. Because with permanent cash value life insurance policies, there's something called a cash surrender value. And if the policy is owned by the charity or your donor advised fund, you can actually access that cash surrender value to give to charities while you're alive and have no tax disposition on taking that money out. Or you can use the dividend from the policy and have that paid to charity every year. So definitely some lovely things you can do. Last couple of things, policy preserver. In Canada, there's about $7 billion of term life insurance that falls off the books every year. Term life insurance is very inexpensive, as you know, and it's for temporary needs. But as you get older, it becomes more expensive. But you can always convert it to permanent insurance without any medical evidence at any time. The problem is it's very expensive. So if you have one of these term policies and you were going to dump it, why not instead consider donating it to charity? You could convert that policy and donate it to charity, in which case now the premiums are charitable donations. You get a receipt for that and you've created a lovely legacy. Or in some cases, if your health has gone awry, you can find a charity will actually pay for that policy going forward. So don't let those things sort of fall off by the wayside. And then finally, we mentioned about people who have done an estate freeze or will be doing an estate freeze. Sarah mentioned about donating private company shares. I'll just give you a high level. We had two brothers who sold a business for $120 million. One of them had a freeze value of $28 million, which means he has an estate tax of $7 million. His estate tax is $7 million. That's where we came in. What we did was we reduced that $7 million estate tax from $7 million to $500,000, and we created a $14 million charitable donation. And we also created a way for his family to get money out of his company tax-free when he dies. The whole cost for that family of setting that up was just under $2 million. So instead of having a $7 million tax for just under $2 million, he has a $14 million gift, a tax bill that's gone from $7 million to $500,000, and a facility to get money out to his family tax-free upon his demise. So again, those are things that a lot of people don't know about, and it's really important to speak to your advisors about it. There are four kinds of givers that we've noticed in our experience. There's some people who want to give money, but don't put their name anywhere. If you do, they'll never give you another cent. I know a lot of people like that, and they're very modest and just don't want people to know about what they're doing from a charity point of view. Others give because they want to set an example and they want others to know that they're giving so that people will copycat them. And then, of course, there are those who do it because they want to be remembered. They want their name on a building. They want a hospital bed. They want to name a program after them, sort of create that immortality. And the last type of person who gives is somebody who knows that giving to charity is great for business. Being philanthropic is a way to really build your brand and your social responsibility, and it can be done for a very, very small cost. So here's an example of a couple that we got introduced to who ended up setting up $1 million life insurance policy to their favorite charity. So their after-tax cost for 20 years is $5,000 a year. $5,000 a year for 20 years, right? That's $100,000 altogether, but they're recognized for giving $1 million to an insurance policy. And that insurance policy also has the ability to create money while they're alive. But again, it was great for them. They're in the real estate business, and just a lovely way to show that you care, but do it in a very, very cost and tax efficient way. last couple of things I'm going to talk to you about are just some case studies, recent case studies. Now, again, these are, I work in the high net worth market. So remember, these are all scalable, but they were just sort of situations where people found that they could become accidental philanthropists. So the first one was a family that sold a big real estate portfolio, and they sold it for $120 million. And ultimately they had a tax bill of $20 million. After all the planning was done, that's not bad. Walk away, $100 million, pay $20 million, but they were asked if they might be considered to be charitable or philanthropic. So they said yes, and they were introduced to me. What we did instead was we took, of that $120 million, we took $40 million and we created a private foundation for them. That $40 million now mitigated the $20 million of tax. So now that $20 million of tax became $20 million of charity. So the family is still sitting there with $80 million. But of course, you're still out of pocket $40 million, at least the kids. So what we did was we then used life insurance to get back all the money they donated to charity that would be the beneficiary of their children. And we did that with a financing strategy to keep the costs as little as possible. So at the end of the day, they turned 20 million of tax into $20 million of charity, created a $40 million legacy for their family, and they used insurance to get all the money back to their family. Just a timing issue. Really, really very sweet. And we love help facilitating those. RSP RIF tax converter. Most people are sitting with $1 million, $2 million of registered money that they're never going to need. Their accountant says, take out the minimum amount when you become 71, and it's growing on a tax-free basis. And it really doesn't move the dial on an estate for a donor. So we happened to deal with one business owner who had a $2 million RSP. He was 65. And first thing we had to let him know is that $2 million was only worth $920,000 to his family because of tax. But what we did was we set up a donor advised fund where he moved the full $2 million to a donor advised fund, right? The tax on that would be about 54%, but he gets a 50% charitable receipt. So it's costing him about 3.5%, 4% to move all that money over to his donor advised fund. Now he's got $2 million there as opposed to $920 for his family. We then used an insurance policy in the donor advised fund to create a further $3.5 million. So at the end of the day, he went from $1 million of tax to about $4.5 million of charity. And again, it doesn't have to be the full $2 million that you move over. Consider moving 100,000, 250, 500, but just look at it as part of your planning. The third one was a recent gift that we did for a hospital in Toronto, where we had a donor who had a liquidity event, a very big liquidity event, and they wanted to name the neonatal ICU for this particular hospital after their family. And their family had some experience there and really felt that they wanted to give back. But in this case, the hospital didn't have a neonatal ICU yet. It wouldn't be ready for another 11 years, 12 years. So what we did was we set up a life insurance policy where they donated some appreciated securities to the hospital, which saved them capital gains taxes and saved them taxes along the way. It went to fund an insurance policy that's owned by the charity. And what happened is the cash surrender value continues to grow. Then in year 11, the hospital can now take out $2 million of cash for the neonatal ICU. And in year 12, they can take another $2 million out in cash for the neonatal ICU. And there's still a $1.5 million gift, a legacy gift in that policy available for when that couple is no longer around. Again, a great way of using insurance, not just for a future legacy gift, but using it for a present gift and a way to save taxes. And the last one I'll just talk to you about is a leveraged charitable donation. It's not unusual for people to have investments and they like their investments. I don't want to give up my investments. I happen to like what I'm doing right now, but they might have an estate tax. So this was a couple worth about $30 million, and they ultimately had a $5 million estate tax that would be due. What we did was we set up a joint last to die insurance policy for $10 million. And we used financing, premium financing. So what they did was they took $500,000 from their investment portfolio, put it into the policy, and then they use the policy's cash value to borrow back the 500,000 to give it back to their investment advisor. Because they're borrowing to invest, they get to deduct the interest and also some other ancillary costs. But now they have their money still to invest, but they have this insurance policy. They do this for 10 years. They're going to put out $5 million and borrow the $5 million every year or over 10 years. And the policy at their death will be $15 million. Upon their death, the bank will get paid back the $5 million that they borrowed. There's 10 million left that's going to go to a foundation that will generate a charitable receipt for 10 million, and that will save their estate taxes $5 million. So what a nice arrangement. They had all their money still to invest. They created a foundation for $10 million, and they saved $5 million of estate taxes, which now became charity. Again, every situation is different, and this is scalable to whoever is dealing with this on their basis. Remember, I talked to you about the sandwich: emotional, technical, and emotional. So one of the ways that I engage clients as well, and really this is asking everybody on this call, can you name your grandparents? So most of us would say, sure, I know the names of my grandparents, but I ask you, and I can't see you, how many of you know the names of your great-grandparents? It would be far fewer, I'm sure. This is actually a picture of my great-grandparents, Liba and Liba Gross. Oh my gosh, I can't remember my great-grandfather's name. Main block here. Anyway, this is a picture of my great-grandparents. And this is in 1934 in Poland, unfortunately, before they died in the Holocaust. But imagine if on January the 1st, you received an envelope in the mail, and inside there was a check for $10,000 from your great-grandfather. Do you think you'd remember his name? Well, clearly I didn't get a check for $10,000 every January. Otherwise I would remember his name. I'm telling you, it's crazy. But anyway, with proper planning, you can be remembered for somebody who does that with your children and grandchildren. And they say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's when the weather conditions are perfect. But if it's windy out, the apple's far from the tree. And if there's a tsunami, like there is today with social media and just a breakdown of the core family, the apple doesn't even know it came from a tree. So we see that the ways to pass along those values and those virtues, those legacies to our children, and more importantly, to our grandchildren, is either through religion or through philanthropy, or both. They're not mutually exclusive. But with proper planning, you can be remembered for doing something great and perpetuating your sense of social responsibility and giving back, and go from what we call success to significance. And I think really people today, especially during COVID, they want to go from success to significance. They just don't know how. So how do we suggest to do that? Well, I believe that the next steps, I have something called the 48-hour rule, which means if what we talked about today resonated in any way, come up with one thing you'd like to do in the next 48 hours and do something about it. Call your advisor, contact us, speak to Sarah. But if you leave it to fester and not do anything about it, it sort of gets lost, and we get busy in our busy ADHD world that we're in. And really, there's no obligation to have a meeting. We love to meet with families, and we love to meet with their advisors, and we like to help to structure plans together. So please consider that as well. The other thing, if you reach out to me, please connect on LinkedIn. We're regularly posting information about philanthropy. We'd be happy to share with you. We have a number of one-pagers that actually talk about all the cases that we spoke about. Sort of they're like case studies and very easy to read prose in terms of how that does. We also have a digest of tax letter articles since 2011, over 100 of them, all dealing with estate planning issues, which we'd be happy to share with you as well. Open a donor advised fund with the Oakville Community Foundation. Like I said, you will never regret it. You will only be so happy about it, and you'll tell all your friends and family that they've got to follow suit. It's a wonderful thing to have all your strategic philanthropy, a consigliere over there, Sarah and her group, to be able to look after things for you and give money away to causes that you care about, and learn about how to maximize your DAF over at the Oakville Community Foundation. Don't just have the money sitting there. There's ways for you to create even more transformational money with the money that you have sitting there. Just sit down and invest the time. Don't ignore it. And I just feel that there's such a great opportunity but there's also a great responsibility as well. And the last thing I'd say here is let us know. We have a lot of advisors say, Mark, why do you share all your secrets with everybody? Like, why, like, you know, you're giving away the whole, you're giving the farm, selling the farm, so to speak. I'm very grateful that I'm in, you know, I grew up in a very charitable family. And I'm very grateful that I have the ability, that God's given me the ability to be able to take what I do for a living for 30 years and move the shells around to create all of this amazing legacy. And like I said, our goal is $100 million a year. We'd love to create $1 billion a year. And I know it sounds like a big number, but it's not. It's really more like crowdfunding. So we're asking you, if anything comes out of this meeting and you do something with it, let us know. Let us know that you created $1 million or $2 million or $5 million. We don't need to know the details. We just want to know so that we can add that to our goal and say, look, we not only get rewarded in this world, hopefully we get a big reward in the next world as well. And I think that it creates an energy around other advisors who now say, hey, I want to participate. I want to get into it. And hopefully if we do that, we can do some amazing things for our families and for our clients and for the charities that we love. And that, last thing, consider your own $1 million life insurance gift. Here, it's so easy. Imagine going ahead. Here's an example of either a 30-year-old couple, or sorry, a 30-year-old, a 40 or a 50-year-old, let's just say a 40-year-old. If they bought a life insurance policy for $1 million that they paid only for 10 years, so it was a 10-pay policy, and then they never paid again. If you're a 40-year-old, if you're male, it would be about $12,000 a year after tax. Okay, so $120,000 to be able to give $1 million to charity. And remember, you're getting a tax savings every year on that to save you taxes today. And you could fund it with appreciated securities or with flow throughs. In other words, lots of great ways to do this. But imagine everyone on this call, we all create $1 million policy for the Oakville Community Foundation. No reason that we can't have $100 million built up, bing bang, chick chuck. And that is the end. I want to thank everybody for listening. I know we're going to open it up for questions. Bindu, I'm going to pass it along to you.
Thank you, Mark. Listen, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. There was just so much great information there. And I have a million questions, but I do want to start with saying thank you to everybody for joining us today. And thank you, Mark, for spending some time with us. And as you said, sharing all your secrets. Apparently your free bar is low on that regard, which is wonderful. And really sort of helping, I think, folks who've joined us today think about what this mean for them, and then helping us profile the Oakville Community Foundation as a place where they could potentially go to have some of these conversations and to work with professionals like you to think about really great ways to strategize how they can maximize their charitable giving, but also minimize their tax liability and not feel bad about achieving both of those goals, right, at the same time. So this has been really marvelous. I want to open it up to questions. And so I think there's a chat function and a Q&A function that people can chime in on. So please do. But I am going to kick off with a couple of things because frankly, I have your attention and I've got questions for you. And I think I'd just start with saying, so you're talking about dollars and sums and numbers that are huge, like, liquidity events of $40 and $50 million and all of the sort of very wealthy clients that you have. But I guess my question for you, because I don't see myself in that bucket, is this something that I could do, like as, sort of an employee of a company? So I'm not self-employed, I'm not a wealthy independent, or I don't feel like it. Like, how rich do you have to be to sort of access some of these strategies? And again, I'm being super selfish. This is all about me. So let's.
It's a great question. The word philanthropy or philanthropist is a little snooty. It's like charity we get, but philanthropy sounds like it's for rich people, like Bill Gates, Warren Bezos, or Michael. Those guys can give money. And I think that's a bit of a misnomer because, it really can be anybody can become a philanthropist and really think of it. If somebody has an estate valued at, $1 million, which again is, if you have real estate in the GTA, you're not living high in the hog with a real estate portfolio of $1 million. But imagine if you had, a $2 million estate and you just left 1% to charity. 1% is $20,000. It's not going to change anything for your family, right? 20,000 on 2 million. But that 20,000 will not only create a legacy for your family, but it'll also create a charitable receipt of 20,000 to save 10. So it's really costing 10 to give 20 to charity. So it really, there are different ways you have to, I think what it comes down to, Bindu, is you have to look at your own situation and sort of do an inventory of what assets you have, make sure that you're never going to run out of money. You've got your retirement planning done. You've got, what taxes you're going to be having, and then looking at the different assets and what they're doing to sort of figure out what could you possibly give while you're alive or at death, and just do it in the most efficient way possible. So absolutely, it can be $10,000. Think of it, even setting up a donor advised fund at the Oakville Community Foundation, it's $2,500, right, Sarah?
Yep, that's correct, Mark. You got it.
Well, let's say here we are, and you go, okay, I know I give away $2,500 a year to charity every year, right? So why don't I give it away now, and I'll put it into my fund, and I'll save all that taxes, right? $1,250, and I've got $2,500 sitting there. And then I get on the phone to say, Sarah, please give some to this, shelter or this, da, 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 da. You're giving it away anyway, but now you're going to do it in a more like a consigliere fashion. And now you really feel like a philanthropist, right? And then you just keep adding to that fund along the way, depending on the success you have and other ventures that you have in life. So hopefully that answers your question, Bindu. It's really across the board, everyone, and young people as well. I want you to know, we have some philanthropists that are in their 20s who set up a donor advised fund, and they think they're big shots, at putting away, have their own name on a fund that they use for business, and they're in their 20s, and all they're doing was giving money they were going to give to charity anyway, to a foundation, and setting up something that has their name on it. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, which was actually is a great segue to the question I was going to ask. And sorry, Sarah, were you going to jump in there?
No, you go right ahead, Bindu. Thank you.
Which is really, when do you start? So, I sort of feel like, okay, I'll fully admit that sort of thinking about what will happen after my death feels like a really long way away, except my kids will tell you, no, like, you're old, mom, and you really should get to planning on all of this. But when do you start doing this? Because I'm hearing you talk about, sort of moving RRSPs and registered accounts and perhaps donating them and making the bequest there. But I've been hustling for the last 25 years to build up my RRSP so that I got something to retire on, right? I don't have like a big fat pension. I'm like a corporate worker, and that's what I've been doing. So tell me about, like, when do you start? When is it when you're working your way through and realize you in fact did save enough money, and now you're sort of planning to what to do with your extra? Or do I do it now when I'm still in the middle of my working years for a long time, probably, and want to think about how to do that, and also think about funding all the impending expenses that are kind of come up with my kids? As you mentioned, thanks for that enlightening moment that my kids will be on my payroll until they're 55. So, but anyways, I'm curious as to sort of thinking about when is the right time to start. And listen, there's a lot of people who are probably on this call who are shaking their head at me, but I know I'm not alone, because I have these conversations with my peers and my peer group, and we're not certain how to tackle some of this work.
Well, I think it starts with having a conversation with your professional advisor. Okay, like this area of strategic philanthropy was spoken about for many, many years. Very few people were doing it. Now it's being spoken about even more, and there are more advisors doing it, but there's still a huge glut. There are so few that are really involved with this. So I think it's important to build a team, of people that you can help you and you can consult with. But, Bindu, they say that charity begins at home. It's true. You have to look after yourself, right? And then you have to say, okay, I can look after myself, and I can be generous enough to give to other people, and that comes from making a plan. And I made that very clear. A lot of people do not have any planning. They just have investing. So if you have to do the planning and you see, hey, we could, at the end of the year, I have an extra $1,000, or I have an extra, whatever it is, So why not then set up a donor advised fund for yourself, or use it to buy a life insurance policy owned by your donor advised fund? I can create now, that'll create for me a, $250,000 legacy gift. Wow. So no cookie cutter. Every situation is very unique. But I will just tell you that I had a very sad story. A fellow by the name of Nick, who came to hear me speak at one of these Leave a Legacy series I was sponsoring through the CAGP. And he approached me, and he was a guy in his 70s, a real Renaissance man, busy as can be, but no children, no wife, and he had a $3 million tax bill to do. So that we knew. And we said, why not do something for charity? And we went ahead and put out proposals to all these different charities. He was involved in the science world, science and research and all of that. Anyway, I kept following up with him. He's traveling, blah, blah, blah. I call him up. He says, Mark, it's not a good time. He just had a heart attack. He was at North Air General Hospital. He says, I'll speak to you when I get out. The following Wednesday, I got the notice in the paper that he had died and that his funeral was the next day on Thursday. So I went, and it was a small gathering because he did not have a lot of family there. And there was even a borrowed, pastor who was there to sort of, like, he really not, but I thought, what a shame. $3 million is going to the tax department, and he could have created a tremendous legacy to help so many people with that money, and he didn't. So I would also suggest, Bindu, that the best time to deal with this is while the sun is shining. And that's right now. If anything, COVID has made us much more aware of our mortality and our incompletions. And we're going to have more, I'm sure everyone on this call, nobody has slept on a park bench other than maybe you were in college or something, and it was by choice, and nobody's missed a meal other than by choice. And everyone's had clothing on their back. They've never got. That means, you're rich compared to the rest of the world. If you're making $30,000 in Canada, you're in the top 5% of the world's population, so I think we have to start appreciating more of what we have, and then say, hey, we can actually part with some of this and, basically adopt a charity or charities into our planning.
I love that. And I think that's, it's so true. For sure, the pandemic, I think, has caused us all to reflect on the disparities, right, between parts. It's shone a real light on the inequities in the world and some of those disparities. And I think what I loved so much about your presentation today, Mark, and I really do want the slides because I've got to do some serious thinking, was just that some of these things don't require you to, invest 30 hours or 100 hours into this. Like, change the beneficiary on your, on this account or on that. And you could start with those things to take the action, and then lead to a more, perhaps courageous conversation that you initiate with your family and some of the advisors that, like you and others, to start on that work, and just to really think about how we do continue to give back to our communities, because we really we are very, very blessed, whether you have $1 million or $20 million or $100 million, right? So that's incredible. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to hear from you, and I think we're nearly at time, so I want to be respectful.
Yes.
We are.
Okay.
We did not save anybody any time. We, in fact, filled it beautifully. So I'm just going to wrap up really quickly. This is my slide, my closing slide, which is to say, be in touch, please. Reach out. The Give Oakville campaign, which is, as I mentioned at the start, is the campaign for our community and our charities. It launches in mid-November. It's up for 5 weeks, and we're going to be trying to raise a lot of funds for a lot of really well-meaning, great charities, And so if you have clients who are looking for ways to give and locally have an interest, it's a great way to do so very strategically. So thank you very much.